Yeah, hello everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you all today. My name is Angus. I'm 27 years old. And growing up, I was brought to church every Sunday, and so naturally I came across the Ten Commandments. And I must say the Ten Commandments seemed fairly easy to understand. They were a set of rules for Christians to follow. And for example, you shall have no other gods before me. So just don't follow other religions, quite straightforward. Honor the Sabbath, that equals make sure you don't skip church on Sundays. And furthermore, there were the moralistic commandments, such as do not murder and do not steal. And in fact, it seemed like a lot of the commandments, they were appropriate for non-Christians as well. But as I grew up, I couldn't help but feel a sense of restriction from a set of rules that seemed to be quite outdated. But this was not really a concern to me as I was drifting away from Christianity anyways. The Ten Commandments did not apply to me anymore. And that was all I thought about it growing up. And thankfully, I've been fortunate enough to now have listened to many of Pastor Lam's sermons consistently since about 2019. And fast forward to the present, we have just finished a year-long series on the Ten Commandments. And to be honest, this series has really changed the way I see the Bible for the better. By constantly referencing other verses in the Bible, in the Old and the New, while covering the commandments, Pastor Lam really demonstrated how the Bible functions as a cohesive unit of the 66 books. The Decalogue is a very significant piece of the grand puzzle that is the Bible. I really appreciate the story that Pastor Lam wrote, the story of Ada and Steve, with the water that the fish swam in representing the Decalogue, that instead of restricting, is actually what sustains the fish, i.e. God's people. When Ada and Steve were tempted away by Satan, which was the whale, Moby Dick, away from the water and to Egypt, the land of idols, they could not breathe, and they were crying out for a return to the water. And Pastor reminds us that the Ten Commandments are almost like wedding rings. One stone tablet was for God, and the other was for his people. It represents a covenant that he loves his people, whom he took out of Egypt, and in return, they are to love him back wholeheartedly. Sadly, we can see in the Old Testament that while God took them out of slavery, the Israelites never truly left the city of idols. Their hearts still belong there. They worship other gods, they married foreign wives, and they continued to rebel against God time and time again. We've been told many times that the Ten Commandments can be seen as one main commandment and 9 sub-commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. This is the most important commandment of all because it screams exclusivity. To honor this commandment is to say, I love God with all my heart, and everything else comes a distant second. To quote Packer's concise theology, which Pastor referenced, every Christian's life purpose must be to glorify God. It is not negotiable. Christians are to know him, to love him, with everything that they are and every ounce of their body and soul. Yet when I reflect upon myself, that is not what I have been doing. I was really struck in particular by the preaching of the 8th commandment, do not steal. The concept of stealing worship from God is something that I would have never thought of on my own. Yet when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Ever since the first act of stealing in Genesis, where Eve saw and took the fruit, humans have been doing likewise ever since, doing what is right in their own eyes instead of the Lord's, thus stealing worship of God that is rightfully his. I mentioned earlier that I am now 27 years old. I would say this really feels like the age of real adulthood, in a sense. I'm surrounded by friends and acquaintances that are getting engaged or getting married, having kids, moving abroad, starting ventures and projects, etc. Simply put, they are doing what they want to do. This is what the world has been telling us ever since we were little kids. To do things that satisfy the desires of the flesh and the human mind. What is right in their own eyes. And the same goes for me. For most of my 27 years, I've been doing things according to my own desires. whether that be chasing my passions or dwelling in laziness. To see the 10 Commandments as 10 do's or don'ts would be to do it huge injustice. To go through the 10 Commandments is to realize how much we utterly fail to follow them. I'm eternally thankful that the Bible has shown me how broken and sinful I am, but that God in His grace has redeemed us through Christ. The Decalogue points us towards our severe need for His redemption, because to achieve it through our own actions is simply impossible. Jesus tells us to fix our eyes and hearts onto the cross, to love the Lord with all our mights, so that our hearts will be so full of Him that the gospel that it simply has no space for the things that will lead us to destruction, namely money, sex, and power. To have new eyes to see the greatness of the treasures in the kingdom above, so that the treasures of the world pale in comparison. And there is no other way to do this than to drown ourselves with God's word, the water of life. When we recognize how strong the temptations of the world are around us every day, we realize we must fight it with an even stronger opposing force. The effect may be subtle each day, but it really builds up over weeks and months. Now, this may have been a sharing to all of you, but it is equally me talking back to myself. May we have strong determination to fight powerfully for the gospel in our short time here on this earth. Thank you.